When I stepped into my father's office for the first time since the funeral, I felt a mix of nostalgia and emptiness. The smell of old wood was still there, mingling with the subtle scent he always wore. I started organizing the papers scattered across the desk, trying not to get lost in the memories each object stirred. That's when I noticed something odd. A panel behind the bookcase seemed slightly misaligned. My heart skipped a beat. I had always known my father kept secrets, but I never imagined one would be literally hidden right in front of me. Carefully, I pushed the panel. It gave way with a barely audible click, revealing a small, heavy safe that seemed out of place in such a familiar room. I didn't have time to process the discovery. The door behind me opened and Jonathan stepped in, his confused expression quickly turning into suspicion. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice edged with irritation that had always lingered beneath the surface. Before I could answer, Maggie appeared. Her firm, quick steps echoed across the office. Her eyes widened when she saw the open panel. "Anne, what are you doing?" Her voice carried a mix of alarm and control. I looked at both of them, feeling the tension in the air rise like a storm about to break. The safe between us seemed to pulse, loaded with a secret I didn't yet understand, but instantly recognized as meant for me. The decision to open it, to explore what my father had hidden, suddenly felt inevitable. With a lump in my throat, I leaned forward. I felt the metallic weight of the safe in my hands and realized that in that moment, nothing else mattered. Jonathan stepped closer, trying to stop me, and Maggie grabbed my arm. "You weren't supposed to find that," Maggie whispered, almost in shock. And that's how it all began. A safe, a secret, and the start of something I couldn't yet imagine that would change our family forever. The moment I closed the office door behind me, memories started flooding back. My father wasn't the kind of man to leave things to chance. He trusted me, always, in ways he never did with Jonathan. But that trust had always been wrapped in mystery, in unspoken rules that made me feel like I was walking on the edge of some invisible cliff. Jonathan's glare followed me as I moved toward the desk. He still held that resentment, the kind that simmers quietly until it suddenly erupts. I could almost hear the words he never said aloud. "Dad always liked you better." I knew he had debts, mounting pressures, and a deep-seated envy that he carried like a second skin. It was never just about me. It was about the unfairness he believed ran through every decision our parents made. Maggie, on the other hand, was a master of control. She stood there, poised, but tense, as if the office itself depended on her keeping the right order, the right balance. She feared what would happen if our family secrets came to light, and I knew she would stop at nothing to maintain that fragile equilibrium. Just then, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps drew my attention. Robert Hale entered, his presence calm, yet somehow charged with unspoken authority. He carried a leather briefcase and a stack of documents, his glasses catching the light in a way that made his eyes seem sharper than usual. "N.A., Jonathan, Margaret," he said, his voice measured. "I've brought the paperwork your father asked me to prepare. It's time to go over the details." My pulse quickened. The safe was right there, a silent testament to the mysteries my father had carried to the grave. And now, with Robert here, the official world of legalities and secrets was colliding with the raw, personal tensions that had been simmering in our family for decades. I realized, with a strange mix of dread and curiosity, that uncovering the truth about my father would mean confronting everything I had felt about him, and everything Jonathan and Maggie had tried to shield themselves from. The question wasn't just what the safe contained, but whether we were ready to face what it meant for all of us. The tension in the office was almost unbearable. Jonathan stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he glared at me. "You don't just stumble onto things like this, Anne. What are you even thinking?" he snapped, his voice sharp, accusing. I met his gaze, refusing to flinch. I had spent my life trying to understand my father, trying to decode his secrets, and now, for the first time, one of those secrets was within my reach. I found it, Jonathan. It's here. This safe. I said quietly, but with firmness. He scoffed, running a hand through his messy hair. Of course it's here, and of course it's meant for you. Dad always liked you more. He trusted you over me. The bitterness in his tone made the air thick. I could feel years of envy, of whispered resentments rising to the surface. Maggie stepped in between us, her hands tense at her sides. Anne, you don't understand. You shouldn't be going through anything yet. Some things are better left alone for now, she said, her voice tight but controlled. But I couldn't stop. My father had trusted me in ways he hadn't trusted Jonathan, yes, but this was bigger than favoritism. The safe, the documents, the envelope with my name, they were all pieces of a puzzle I needed to see through. Robert, standing nearby, observed us quietly, his expression unreadable. He set the papers on the desk, but didn't intervene immediately, letting the family drama unfold as if he already knew it would. My name appeared repeatedly across the documents he brought, and every mention felt like a subtle electric jolt. I was at the center of something I barely understood. Jonathan's frustration grew louder. Why does it always come back to you, Anne? Why does Dad always leave you in the middle of everything? I felt my own anger flare, but I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. Because this isn't about favoritism. This is about understanding him, understanding what he left behind. I can't just ignore it. Maggie's grip on my arm tightened slightly. You're opening doors you don't know how to close. Please, just wait for Robert to explain first. But I couldn't stop. My father had trusted me in ways he hadn't trusted Jonathan. Yes, but this was bigger than favoritism. The safe, the documents, the envelope with my name, they were all pieces of a puzzle I needed to see through. And at that moment, I realized the first cracks in our family were no longer hidden. They were wide open, waiting for the revelations that had already begun.
My hands shook slightly as I lifted the envelope from the safe. It was heavier than I expected, sealed with my name written in my father's unmistakable handwriting. For a moment, I just stared at it, feeling a mix of fear and anticipation. Every instinct in me screamed that whatever was inside would change everything. Jonathan leaned against the desk, arms crossed, his blue eyes sharp and suspicious. "You really think you should be touching that?" he asked, though there was a hint of curiosity behind his anger. Maggie hovered close, her expression taut, like she was waiting for me to make a mistake. "Annie, you don't have to open it. Maybe you shouldn't," she said quietly, almost pleading. But I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I broke the seal, and inside, I found a collection of items that made my stomach twist. Old photographs of people I didn't recognize, their faces smiling, unaware of the secrets that connected them to my father. Next, I discovered carefully organized bank statements, accounts I had never heard of, balances that made my head spin. And then there was a small note, folded neatly, written in my father's handwriting. "For you, Annie, only you. I hope this helps you understand and forgive." I swallowed hard. The words felt like a key, unlocking emotions I didn't know were bottled up inside me. My father had left me more than money. He had left me a puzzle, a secret life that I was the only one meant to uncover. Jonathan's jaw tightened, his voice low and bitter. "So this is it, huh? Everything you've been given while I get nothing?" Maggie's hand landed on my shoulder, firm but cautious. "You weren't supposed to see this yet," she whispered, her eyes flicking nervously between me and Jonathan. I looked down at the papers spread across the desk, the photographs, the notes. I realized, with the heavy weight settling in my chest, that the safe hadn't just revealed secrets, it had revealed my father's intentions, his trust, and the part of our family story I had been kept away from. And in that moment, I understood that opening the envelope was not just an act of curiosity. It was the first step into a truth that would ripple through all of us, changing everything we thought we knew about our family. Jonathan's face twisted with anger the moment he saw the contents of the envelope spread across the desk. "You've been hiding this from me all along, haven't you, Annie?" he shouted, his voice sharp enough to make the papers flutter. "All these years, and you've been the favorite, the one Dad trusted, and now this? You're sitting on everything he left behind." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "Jonathan, it's not like that. I didn't hide anything. I found it, and I need to understand it just like you would." But my words did nothing to calm him. He slammed his fists on the desk, sending a stack of documents skidding across the floor. "No, you're always in the middle, Annie. Always! Everything Dad gave you, everything he trusted you with, it's tearing this family apart." Maggie stepped between us, her hands firm on our shoulders, trying to hold back the storm. "Enough, both of you. You weren't supposed to find that," she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her usual composure. I looked at her, her words heavy with unspoken guilt. I could see it in her eyes. Fear, control, a desperate need to contain something she had been protecting for decades. Jonathan turned on her, his voice rising even further. "And you? You knew about this too, didn't you? You let her take it all while I was left in the dark? Mom, how could you?" Maggie's hands trembled slightly, but she held her ground. "Jonathan, this isn't about blame. It's about keeping the family from falling apart. Please, don't make this worse." I felt the weight of the safe behind me, the envelope still open, its secrets now exposed. Every paper, every photograph, every note had become a lightning rod, pulling all the tension, resentment, and hidden truths into one explosive moment. And yet, even in the chaos, I knew I couldn't stop. The truth was there waiting for me, and it demanded to be faced. "You weren't supposed to find that," Maggie whispered again, almost as if speaking it aloud could undo what had already been done. But there was no going back now. The confrontation had begun, and nothing in our family would ever be the same. Robert cleared his throat, finally breaking the heavy silence in the office. He moved closer to the desk, his hands resting on the leather briefcase as he spoke with a calm authority that made the room seem even smaller. "Anne, Jonathan, Margaret," he began, his voice steady but measured. "I think it's time you fully understand what your father left behind." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The documents, the photographs, the envelope, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle I was finally going to see complete. Robert opened the briefcase and pulled out a folder marked with my initials. Inside this folder are the details of an account your father kept secret. It's substantial, far beyond anything you might have imagined, and it was meant exclusively for Anne. Jonathan's face paled, disbelief flashing across his features. "Wait, what do you mean, exclusively for her?" "Your father set up this account without telling anyone else, Jonathan," he explained, flipping through the papers. "It's an inheritance that he intended for Anne alone. Every calculation, every transfer, it was all arranged so that she would be the sole beneficiary." I stared at the numbers, my breath catching in my throat. The figures were staggering, far beyond anything I had ever imagined, and the realization hit me hard. My father had trusted me with something that could alter everything in our lives. Jonathan's hands clenched into fists, his blue eyes burning with a mix of shock and rage. "So all this time, I get nothing? Not even a hint?" Maggie's face fell, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and warning,
as if the weight of this revelation might collapse the fragile structure she had built around our family. It was meant to protect her from mistakes we might have made. Robert continued, his voice calm but firm. Your father believed that this inheritance was her responsibility, her future, and that she could handle what none of us could. I felt my chest tighten. The responsibility of it all pressed down on me like a physical weight. This wasn't just money. It was a key to a life I hadn't expected, a trust that came with strings I hadn't yet understood. Jonathan turned away, his voice barely a whisper. This isn't fair. I replied, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Life isn't always fair, but now we have to face it. And in that moment, the first clear line was drawn between us. The inheritance was mine, and the truth about my father's intentions was finally out. Nothing would ever be the same.
The room felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves were closing in on us. Jonathan's anger had shifted, no longer aimed just at me, it had turned toward Maggie. And you, Mom, you knew about this, didn't you? You let him do this to me while keeping me in the dark. His voice trembled with rage. Maggie's hands shook slightly, but she tried to maintain her composure. Jonathan, it's not what you think. I was trying to protect all of us, she said, her voice tight, almost breaking. Protect us? By taking Dad's trust away from me? By giving everything to her? He shouted, gesturing toward me, his eyes blazing. I stayed quiet, feeling the weight of their emotions pressing down on me. Robert's eyes darted between us, his calm presence doing little to diffuse the tension. He opened another folder, but I barely noticed. The focus in the room had shifted entirely to the raw, emotional fractures between us. Jonathan turned fully toward Maggie now, his face twisted in betrayal. I always knew there was favoritism, but this is a lifetime of lies. Maggie took a deep breath, her gaze flicking to me. Anek, you need to understand, some truths are more dangerous than lies. You don't have to go further than this if you don't want to. I shook my head. Mom, it's already out. We can't undo this. I have to know everything. Jonathan slammed his hands on the desk again. So now it's me against all of you, everyone teaming up against me while you get everything? The tension was palpable, the kind that could ignite with a single word. For a brief moment, I realized our family had become unrecognizable. The alliances had shifted, the loyalties questioned, and the undercurrents of resentment that had simmered for years were now fully exposed. Maggie's voice softened, almost pleading. Anek, promise me you'll be careful. Don't let this destroy us. I looked at her, then at Jonathan, and finally down at the documents. It's not just about protection anymore. It's about facing the truth. And whether we like it or not, that truth is tearing us apart already. In that moment, I understood that the revelations from the safe had not only changed what I knew about my father, they had shattered the fragile emotional bonds that held our family together. Every glance, every word, every unspoken resentment had come to the surface, forming new alliances, new conflicts, and a reality we could no longer avoid.
I kept digging through the documents, my hands trembling as I sorted through contracts, letters, and handwritten notes. What I found next made my chest tighten like a vice. These weren't just financial records, they were a roadmap of decisions my father had made, decisions that had directly affected Jonathan. One letter, yellowed with age, was addressed to both my parents, signed in my father's precise handwriting. As I read it, my stomach sank. It detailed an agreement that ensured the inheritance I now held would bypass Jonathan entirely. There were calculations, legal clauses, and even notes in the margins. Tiny, careful notes from Maggie herself. I felt my vision blur. Mom, I whispered, holding up the pages. Maggie's face went pale, her hands clutching the edge of the desk. She opened her mouth, then closed it, words failing her. The truth was there, undeniable. She had known. She had helped orchestrate this outcome, keeping Jonathan in the dark while ensuring I would be the sole heir. Jonathan, standing behind me, looked like he'd been punched. His voice was low, shaking with anger and disbelief. You let this happen? Mom, how could you?" Maggie's lips trembled. I thought it was the only way to protect the family. I didn't realize how much it would hurt him. I stared at them both, the pieces falling into place. The resentment that had always simmered in Jonathan now made sense. This wasn't just favoritism or Dad's trust. It was a calculated exclusion, one I had unknowingly benefited from. Robert leaned in slightly, his voice measured but firm. "Ain, the documents confirm that your father's intentions were deliberate. This wasn't an accident or oversight. You were chosen because you weren't involved in the decision that affected Jonathan." I swallowed hard, the weight of the revelation pressing down on me. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was a testament to a secret pact between my parents, a decision that had left my brother feeling betrayed and sidelined for his entire life. Jonathan's shoulders slumped, his blue eyes glistening with anger and hurt. "So that's it. I was always second best, and now it's official?" Maggie's hands shook, her eyes pleading with me for understanding. I looked at the papers, then at the faces of my mother and brother, and realized that the safe had done more than reveal money. It had uncovered the truths, the betrayals, and the alliances that had shaped our family. And now there was no turning back. The weight of everything hit me like a storm. The safe, the documents, the inheritance. It wasn't just numbers or old photographs. It was the culmination of decades of secrets, decisions, and betrayals. I looked at Jonathan, his anger now tempered with exhaustion, and at Maggie, whose fear and guilt were laid bare. I realized that the family we thought we knew no longer existed. The bonds that had held us together were cracked, strained by the truths we could no longer ignore. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was clarity. My father had trusted me, not because he favored me, but because he believed I could carry the responsibility and face the truth. I knew what I had to do. The inheritance wasn't just mine. It was a reminder of accountability, of choices made and consequences endured. I would honor it, not by hiding from the past, but by confronting it, understanding it, and deciding my own path forward. Jonathan and Maggie would have to find their way through this revelation as well. Forgiveness wouldn't come quickly, and neither would trust. But acknowledging the truth was the first step towards something resembling peace. As I closed the folder and placed the documents back into the safe, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and resolve. This was the legacy of my father, a complicated gift, wrapped in secrets. But it was mine to carry, and mine to understand. And as I stepped out of that office, I realized something essential. Life isn't about avoiding the shadows of the past. It's about facing them, learning from them, and choosing your own path in spite of them.
Make sure to like this video, and if you want to see more stories like this and dive deeper into family secrets, mysteries, and unexpected revelations, remember to subscribe to the channel.